Trenton Journal is for people who won't take no for an answer. Trenton Journal is for community leaders. Trenton Journal is for people who won't settle. Trenton Journal highlights some of the positive voices in the community and fills in the information gaps through original reporting.
Welcome to Capital Conversations. I'm your host, Kenneth Miles, founder and publisher of the Trenton Journal. Each episode, we bring you change makers and stakeholders who are making an impact in the capital city. And today I have with me Rolando Ramos, who's running for mayor of Trenton, New Jersey.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to engage and get my message out to the community.
All right. So you spent 26 years in the Trenton Police Department.
Yes, sir.
What made you decide to run?
So I grew up in this city. This is the town I grew up in. I went to the school here. I graduated from Trenton High in 1987. And I want to shout out to the 86-87 Trenton High football team, first team to go to the state playoffs. And just a shout out to those guys. This is 40 years this year of that team. We're going to do a celebration for that. I went away to college. I went to Rutgers University after high school, and I came back. I was recruited by a guy that worked for the city, Carlos Pacheco. He knew my sister, and he knew I had gone to college. And while I was in college, I joined the military. I was in Marines, Reserves. And he knew that we needed guys like that, accomplished guys to come back and serve the city in the police department. And he was persistent. That guy would come to my house every Christmas break, every summer break, and he'd make sure that he knew he was keeping tabs on me. I finally took the test, and I scored pretty high. When you go to college, you kind of think, oh, being police, that's below me, But it was the best decision I've ever made in my life. I came back home, and I got to serve my community. I was trying to do a tracking of the number of Hispanic cops. I think I was number 16 ever in the city, the police department, that a Latino officer. And so, I take pride in that. And throughout my career, I've been one of the grunts, man. I've always been in the worst neighborhoods, dealing with the worst criminals, guys that were gang members, guys that were drug dealers. I wanted to make a difference, and I, used targeted investigations. I was a proactive unit member, very proud of my time there. I then became a detective, and I continued that focus on locking up the people that were bringing down this city. I have one story. I remember off duty. I was walking to the barbershop down the street from my mom's house. I grew up on Center Street, and there was a young man who was breaking into a house, and I saw him, and he saw me, and he started hiding because he knew who I was. I ended up grabbing onto him, and we started struggling, and the neighborhood called the police for me. And I had officers on scene within 30 seconds. And that's because I made those relationships. People knew that I was out there for them. And so I always tried to be that type of cop. I rose up the ranks, I became a sergeant, and then I became a lieutenant. I was running the South District for 2 years. And I was making decisions for the South District, trying to improve, the quality of life of the people that live here. But around 2011, the city, the governor cut some of the funding to the city, and we ended up laying off over 100 cops, which we've yet to recover from, and that's been, 15 years? And yet, so I ended up backfilling, going back to sergeant for 5.5 years. In 2016, I ended up getting re-promoted to lieutenant, and like I was telling you earlier, I was running the major crime section. I had a homicide, violent crime, the street crime units. I had all the high-profile units under my authority. And we were out there trying to, make the city safer. 2018, I retired, but I still had aspirations to become police director. I had gotten my master's degrees from Seton Hall in 2016, and I felt prepared for that position. I had done everything I had to do. I retired a detective lieutenant. I had made decisions in this city. People don't recognize that the decision making of police officers, police leaders is completely different than private enterprise and government. You know, the decisions you make are life and death. You know, you have to protect your officers, but you also have to protect the community. And a lot of times, the community doesn't recognize that those decisions are split second, even as a supervisor. And so I've made those decisions. I've led. And so when I didn't get the position here to be police director, I ended up saying I need to go find that position, because that desire to lead my own police department never left me. And so I ended up in Kentucky, and then I got an opportunity to become a police chief out in California. It was a small department. It was a reservation, and I never worked on a reservation. And it was exciting, something completely different, completely out of my wheelhouse. And I was there for 2.5 years. I modernized the police department. We were moving in a direction that we were taking over the actual crime enforcement of the reservation. And that reservation is one of the largest reservations in California in terms of land mass. But, you know, the way the laws work in California are a little different. But we were working in that direction to taking over all the criminal enforcement of that valley. And then in 2024, I resigned. They had different leadership take over. They wanted to go in a different direction. That was a direction that I wanted to continue. And so I felt it was best that I resigned and I went back to Kentucky. I worked there for another police department, a sheriff's office. And then I had this burning desire to come back home. My mother still lives here. My family's still here. My brother has a church on Clinton Avenue. My sister's a teacher in the school district. So we're so connected to this community. And I miss my family. And my kids, you know, they wanted to come back home because my son got out of the Marine Corps. And he's like, Dad, this isn't what I'm used to. I want to go back home, you know. And my other son had come down with us, you know, to kind of stay together. And he said, I want to go back home too, Dad. So we all decided, we said, okay, it's time to come back home. And, you know, coming back home, you know, my hope is always that Trenton, man, excels, that it becomes the capital that we all want. And you read and you see things, and you know, to know that Trenton is considered the worst state capital in the country, that kills me. That burns me up, because it shouldn't be this way. You know, when I was growing up, I could go anywhere in this city. I could walk anywhere in this city. I used to play basketball in the Berg, play basketball in Cowwater Park, play basketball in North Trenton, you know, Wilbur section. I never had issues. I went around, and I'm a light-skinned Puerto Rican, and I would go anywhere because that was this community, you know. I grew up, you know, in South Trenton. I grew up in the boys club. I grew up Kearney Homes, you know, playing football with the kids there, you know, and going to the Cooper Pool. That's my community. This is who I am, and we've kind of lost a lot of that. The violence, the drugs, you know, the crack epidemic really hurt this city, and we've yet to recover from that drug problem.
As someone who worked on the Trenton Police Department for 26 years, what would you do different in terms of policing in the city?
Well,
in the relations with the community, yeah, given in light of the Department of Justice report of violations, right, of civil rights?
Yes. So, first of all, you know, you need a police, you know, you need a mayor that's actually supporting the police department. That, you know, there are going to be issues that come up, but overall there has to be this belief from the officers that the mayor supports the police department. And you also have to have a mayor that's willing to speak up, whether on the right, you know, when you're doing good things, but also when bad things occur. You have to be responsible. You have to be accountable. And we haven't seen that. You know, we've seen the mayor like resistant to really acknowledge some of the problems. Now, the DOJ report, the final conclusion was training and supervision, right? That was the conclusion, that we need the officers needed more training, I didn't need a DOJ report to say that. The DOJ report is something that, if that's your conclusion, that's something that every police department in this country needs. More training, more supervision, right? But that costs money. And the DOJ didn't offer any of that. In addition, this is a city that has a crime problem, and the DOJ report did not address that either. Any ideas, any support. They didn't offer anything to address the crime problem in Trenton. In addition, let me say this. I wholeheartedly believe that police officers need to do a better job in terms of engaging the community. That has to be a priority. I believe that the cameras have been a blessing to the police departments and to the community, because now you see their interactions, you see the officers' actions, you see how things occur, and not based off of word of mouth or rumors or narratives. You actually see it. And so the DOJ report identified certain cases that had come to light, right? Certain use of force situations. But, I question, because as a law enforcement officer, as an investigator, they tried to frame those incidents as unlawful, but yet they didn't charge any of those officers with any crime, right? And those instances were already investigated by the county, by the police department, internal affairs, which works with the county. They people believe it's just Trenton Police, but the county has a unit that works with the internal affairs to address concerns, especially those types of high-profile cases. So either the county didn't find that those officers were in violation of use of force policy, or the Fed didn't, but they still used it as a means to say, hey, look, there's a problem here. Now, use of force is an ugly situation, because it's still violence. Whether you mace someone or you tase someone, or depending on the kind of force, you're dealing with, deadly force, it's still violence. And so it's, when you record it, it's not a pretty sight. And so right away people, because it's overwhelming at times. You watch some of these videos like, oh my God. But what happens is these videos are limited, and they don't give you the big context. They don't give you all the history and the complete portrayal of what actually occurs. So a lot of times people think, oh, that guy is guilty, and then when all the information, all the evidence presented, it goes to court, let's say, or it goes to a grand jury and they're cleared, people get frustrated. And part of that is the media's fault, where they're not articulating what was actually presented. I told the prosecutor once, because I was accused of use of force. I was suspended, and and this is before pre-body cameras, but thank God the location that we were at had cameras, because they caught the incident, and I was cleared, and my actions were reasonable, justified, and lawful. And I was cleared. I was, brought back to work, and I told the prosecutor, I said, you were quick to take my reputation, something I built over 20 years, and you refused to give it back to me. You refused to go to the media and tell them this guy did nothing wrong. His actions were lawful, reasonable, and justified. And so people continue to believe that I got over, when I first came back. And I fight for that, because I believe that the media is quick to judge, but then not as quick to clarify, But as a leader, you have to acknowledge that there are going to be mistakes made. Guys are going to overreact. There is a lack of training. And so you have to identify ways to improve training. And training has to be consistent and constant. And when you're a smaller, we're at a point where we're mandatory overtime because we don't have enough cops. It's hard to find those times to provide that training. And it costs money. And like I said, that DOJ report identified those two problems, but offered no solutions. And so it's frustrating when you see those types of reports. As a leader, as a police leader, you go, okay, Okay, so give me some advice. Give me some resources. Give me something that I can say, this DOJ report actually benefited me, as opposed to is being used as a cudgel, to say we need major transformation in the police department. And then the police department became reactive, right? They eliminated the street crime unit, the violent crime unit, units that did targeted investigations of gang members, of drug dealers, of violent people. They got rid of those units, and so now you took away it's like taking away the Marines and leaving just the National Guard. I'm not disparaging the National Guard, but Marines and National Guard is completely two different types of military. And you remove the Marines, and you leave Boy Scouts. Let me use that one. And it doesn't, you lose that effectiveness. And so, yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I want to ask you about this. What are your plans for the immigrant population in Trenton as it pertains to ICE raids?
That's a difficult thing. I'm not going to be like some of the mayors, around this country saying things that they can't enforce and they can't do. You have to look at it like, and what happens is this has become very emotional. It's an emotional topic. People are very angry. They're upset. But as a leader, you have to look at what I can do, what we lawfully are able to do. Number one, Trenton Police Department, we don't enforce federal law, right? We're not. That's not our authority. We're local. We're state. We have state authority for Trenton. That's our municipality. That's our authority. And people get confused by that. Well, you're law enforcement, yes, but we have certain authority, and our authority is not federal authority. That comes from the federal government, who have their own law enforcement. FBI, DEA, ATF, ICE, they enforce federal law. And then the state police, they enforce state law, but they have statewide jurisdiction. They can enforce state law anywhere in the state, while we, local police, can only enforce, technically in the city of Trenton. So we don't enforce federal law. So when if there's an officer that, and I'll say this to the public, if there's an officer that requests your status or asks about your status, you should report that officer. That's not his role, right? We need to clarify that that's not the local police department's role. That's number one. Number two, what can we do as a city, right? We can, what you can do is limit access to city property. Are they staging in a city property parking lot? Are they staging, are they holding meetings? You can limit the access to city property. But the role of police is always public safety. And so as a community member, you have the right to protest, you have the right to do that, to walk, to protest. Now, if you break the law, now that causes chaos. And that's the problem. That, instead of just protesting, things become dangerous because people are engaging and trying to interfere, trying to stop. They're blocking traffic, they're blocking, they're grabbing, they're attacking agents, and so it becomes chaotic. And how do we handle that, right? Well, we have to do our jobs as law enforcement officers. We have to try to protect the public, and sometimes from themselves. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because I don't believe that what happened in Minnesota is the model. That's not the model. That's dangerous. You're endangering the public, businesses, people. It just, chaos never works. It just causes more problems. And in the end, two people were shot and had killed because of those type of engagements. And so I don't want that to happen here in Trenton. I don't want someone to be injured or hurt because they illegally, interacted with ICE. But to say, I'm going to have my officers monitor ICE officers and arrest, that's not our call. And I'll tell you this, as officers, if we see criminal behavior in terms of, or the people, the public, they have people that they can contact and make those reports. It's tough as law enforcement to judge that situation. You know what I mean? But what I would say is, if an officer saw something that crossed the line, obviously, hey, that's too much, and then make a report up our chain, the sergeant, and that way that can be communicated.
What makes you the best candidate? We have a lot.
Yeah.
We have a lot. A lot of people made announcements. You have Jossie Edwards, you have Corey McNair, you have Austin Edwards. The mayor, he hasn't officially made an announcement.
Right.
We also have you, who have formally put their hat in the ring.
Yes.
Have you spoken to anyone who said that they're going to run, in terms of, if this doesn't work out, I'll throw my support behind you because I have knowledge in this area? Have you had these conversations?
I think it's still too early for those conversations to be had. I think most of us are just getting our names out there, making announcement. I believe Austin just did his Friday night. I did mine Saturday. So this is all new. To have those conversations right now is just a little premature. I recognize that this group of candidates are pretty good candidates. Mm-hmm. I know previous elections haven't been as good in terms of the quality of people running. Not quality of people, but the qualifications for running. This group seems to have good qualities. They're good people from what my interactions with them. Even the mayor, even though I've not agreed with a lot of the things he's done, I believe he's a good person. He says hi to me. We have, we respect each other. He's not a bad person. And this is not about any personal qualities, anything like that. This is not a personal attack or anything. But for the people, I want them to acknowledge, or to look into each one of us. What have we led? What decisions have we made? Have we ever led? Right? Because now you're asking the city to trust you with a $200 million budget and a city of over 80,000 people, but you've never led even a small group of people. And I don't mean a nonprofit, I mean critical decision-making authority. And so I believe, obviously the mayor, he's had that experience now for 8 years. But prior to that, I'm not sure. But he was elected twice. So he's now have gotten that experience. The other folks, I'm not sure. I don't know their background enough to say, yeah, they have made those types of decisions. But I know I have.
You have. So I want you to look directly into the camera.
Yes, sir.
And tell the viewers why you're the best choice to become the next mayor of Trenton, New Jersey.
Thank you. I'm the best choice because I've actually been a leader. I recognize the issues of this city. I have a plan. I am unafraid to stand forward even when the things get hard. I am willing to be accountable. And I'm not the guy that's going to shy away from the hard, tough situations that happen in a city. We've seen a lack of leadership over the last 20, 30 years. And it's why the city looks the way it is. And we need to change that. We need to change Trenton from being the worst capital in the country to the best capital in the country. And that takes a leader that is willing to stand up when everyone else shies away. And I'm that guy. I ask the folks to look at the people, but look behind the people. See who's actually making the decisions, who's actually a part of their decision-making process. Because you're going to see it's the same cast of characters that have been around forever. I have no one behind me in terms of that. I stand alone. I am beholden to no one, to no party. My care, my decisions will always be based on the people of Trenton and what's best for us. And I believe that's what makes me the best candidate for the mayor of the city. I would ask that everyone go to my website. It's Rolando Ramos for TrentonTriumph.com. There you will see all the my platform. There's 9 categories, and I would ask that everyone take a look at that. It's comprehensive, and it will give you an idea of what I stand for. And I thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome.
Wait, but before we go, and we'll edit this in, but I have to ask you, what would, if elected, what would be your plans to deal with the Trenton water crisis at Trenton Water Works? Because that's a major issue.
Oh yes, that's a major. Before I came, I was sharpening my knowledge of that. This is something that's been going on for years. People don't. A lot of younger folks don't remember that. There was an attempt once about 20 years ago to sell off the waterworks, to privatize it, and for the city to, get some money out of it. The city overwhelmingly voted against that, and so that desire to keep that as a Trenton infrastructure, I'm sure it still persists. So the idea of regionalization or of selling it outright, the people of Trenton aren't going to be happy with that. Problem is that after that happened, there was no one said, hey, this is a focus, man. We need to fix this. And so for the last 20 years, each mayor, each council has just allowed it to deteriorate and deteriorate and deteriorate. Certain council members tried to distance themselves, but they've been on council for 4 years. Now you have a plan, but where have you been for the last 4 years when this stuff is continuing to deteriorate? And so the state DEP has already said these are the problems. I saw a plan from the water department, and the cost, $750 million to fix this. That's now, today. Right, that goes up as the longer we wait.
Inflation.
Right, inflation, and the cost, and as long as we continue to push it down the road, and not start it, not invest, not begin, it's going to continue to cost more money. And so this is like the 3rd or 4th study on this they've done already, or they're doing. Enough. We need decisions to be made, and we need council to step up. We need the mayor to actually say something. I don't know if you've noticed, the mayor has been silent on this issue. I'm amazed that this is such a critical issue, and he has said nothing outwardly.
So are you for privatization?
No, I'm not. I believe that the city we need to find a way. We need to work with the state. We need to find federal funds. We need to find a way to fix and actually hire the people, the right people, because that seems to be, it has become a political patronage place where a family member goes, hey, I need a job, or I'm gonna hide you over here, I'm gonna slide you over here, and so people, instead of training them up, you're gonna give them the job and train them up. Let's get them certified. Let's get them, to be able to do the job, and that hasn't happened. So we have people that aren't adequately trained, aren't certified, and so we need to make sure we're hiring the right people, that we have professionals that know what they're doing to address all these problems. That waterworks, the filtration plant, the reservoir.
Mm-hmm.
Since I've been a kid, they've been talking about replacing that thing. Okay, we know what needs to be done. Let's get to it. Let's get it done. And that seems to be the biggest impediment, the fear of actually making decisions to get things done. Because if you see what's happening with council, they just decided to have another study done. We know the DEP already said what the problems are. Let's get it done. Let's find the money, because obviously that's the biggest problem now. Okay, where are we going to find $750 million? And so we need to tap into every agency, every government assistance. Hey, we need help, and we need this money. So, like I said, I believe that if we fix that thing, and we get the right people working in there, and we update the payment systems, we modernize all the technology, so that when people make payments, it's not a big thing. We can address, and we can collect I believe it'll actually be a big benefit for the city.
I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time to have me on here. Thank you, sir.
Take care.
All right.